projects. The background is usually, it arises with the background usually around land use, yet the community and individuals prioritize ownership, land ownership. I want to share with you one of the research that I personally carried out in 2009 in northern Uganda, where I come from. The community, as we have heard, many of them own customary land. And one of the elders in Pabo told me that the customary land that they have is the land is a property for the dead and the unborn. For those who are alive, they are only caretakers of the land. So if you come, it is for the dead and the unborn. I've documented this in this book. I will dedicate the 3 books, one to Chigamoy, one to the Vice President, and one to the Minister Judith, for you to read these books. So therefore, we have land tenure system, which is a problem. Along the line, we have gender, which, of course, they have suffered a lot, refugees and internally displaced people. The refugees and internally displaced people have not only been evicted from land and barred from exploiting natural resources. Refugees and IDPs, they have issues that have implicated economic, social, environmental governance, and security configuration for early warning. Women make up a very large section of the landless community, despite relying widely on it to sustain families. Customary norms in many member states are restrictive laws that inhibit women from owning land. Women, girls, and the elderly are living at the margins of the society today with alarming conditions of inequality, insecurity, and injustice. There are rising land-related conflicts and crimes, increasing intimate partners violence, growing human rights violations of women workers, and discriminatory laws that pose significant and ongoing risk to women and children. Squatters, those who are having like squatter-related issues from land conflicts, a battle between legal owners and those living in the area without proper documentation, and have been reminded to eat and go. This is very apparent in Kenya, apparent in South Sudan, apparent in Somalia, and also some parts of Ethiopia. Land governance issues, especially those that have generated conflicts, are legally challenging. The legal owners of land have been people with proximity to power and wealth. These legal challenges are confronted with rampant cases implicating murder, boundary conflicts, and influential individuals, accumulation of land through illicit practices and abuse of power, ownership due to lack of land registration, and land ownership between the state and province owners, private owners. Land issues have been noted, politicized, and militarized, especially when it comes to the eviction process. With all this, the heightened disgruntlement of affected people results in violent confrontations. The absence of clear property rights, climatic distortions, and social norms have also perpetrated cattle rustling, for example, in the 70% of the IGAD region. The absence of clearly defined sharing rights regarding proceeds from natural resources has perpetuated conflict in the region, which are sources of conflict over natural resources. The effects of overlapping property rights are inherently inefficient in resource utilization, especially open and common property resources. There is a likelihood of suboptimal investment that is undermining economic growth and hindering job creation. These have created persistent and increasing poverty and income inequality. The privatization of land in the region signifies emerging conflict, especially where external investors showed interest. Though the process is legal and the state is working within its rights, discontent arising from allocating large pieces of land to foreigners, investors could inform conflict. I would like also to get into youth unemployment, which is part and parcel of what we see is going to give us problems in terms of land conflicts. Youth unemployment, I will quote only figures from the different countries of IGAD. Egypt, Djibouti, Djibouti's total numbers of population is 980,000 people, less than a million. They have youth who are from 15 to 24 years. They represent almost 21.6%, and all these are unemployed youth. Ethiopia has about 115 million people, and youth between 15 to 24 have about 3.2%, representing an unemployed group of people. We have put 15 to 24 as the lowest age group for youth. However, African Union puts the age group from 18 to 35. But for us, we wanted to see this particular group of people. In Kenya, we have about 54 million people, probably 56 now, and 7.2% of the youth are unemployed. Somalia, with a population of about 16 million, have about 19.8% unemployed. South Sudan, with almost 12 million, has 18.8% unemployed. Sudan, with about 44 million people, about 32.1% unemployed. Uganda, with close to 46 or above that, population figures have youth of 2.5 who are unemployed. If you increase this age group from 18 to 35, definitely this figure will swell. Again, we have issues that have been of pertinent concern in the region, which is climate, extreme climatic conditions. Torrential rains have caused floods and accelerated soil erosion, and people have been displaced from their areas of habitat. Long drought spells and torrential rains affected over 70% of the region's population, who derive their livelihood from agriculture and pastoralism. Persistent and escalating extreme weather conditions of climate change are among the root causes of migration, both within and across borders. In IGAD region, drought cost the agriculture sector an estimated 96 million US dollars per annum. In Djibouti, drought has caused severe weather shortages and a food crisis affecting 340 people and causing a loss of 50 to 70% of the livestock. This has also been in Somalia and southwestern part of Ethiopia. In Sudan, an estimated 80% of the country's rural population relies on agriculture-based production for their food and income. In Somalia, I've mentioned, at least 215 people have been displaced by floods. In South Sudan, over 1 million people have been affected by floods since July 2020 and to date. By all means, extreme and apparent climate conditions continue to cause conflict, and it is related to land. I would like to mention also a few issues regarding polarized ethnicity and tribalism in the region. Ethnicity has been institutionalized through governance system, legal system, including federally structured countries like Ethiopia. Federalism exacerbated land problems because it brought about land and resource conflicts between regional states and the federal state. In Ethiopia, as I have mentioned, land that belongs to the ethnic group of a regional state and borderlands have been the major conflict. The struggle for political power and wealth, identity politics is attached to land and have been potential sources of pride, competition, and ethnic rivalry. Currently, simple arguments between individuals, brothers, amongst tribes can easily result in conflict that usually draw in the clan, tribal, and ethnic division, and land is not exceptional. Tribal and ethnic issues have created artificial sub-borders that enforce social boundaries. This affects land registration, the process of recording legally recognized interest, ownership, and use in land. In regional context, many are barred from developing, engaging in political activities, if not from a particular tribe, which is popular amongst politicians. Soft borders spill over to other nations, and this makes national borders to be porous and contested. There is a need for a new social contract based on shared prosperity for all inclusivity and promotion of the spirit of collegiality in decision-making is required. I would jump violent extremism because of time. Let me go to interstate conflicts, which probably is also very much appealing to us. The demarcation of borders in the region, as I mentioned before, and then the noted border disputes that include South Sudan, Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Kenya, Somalia, Uganda, South Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Sudan, Kenya, South Sudan, Kenya, Sudan, and Sudan, Ethiopia. In most of the IGAD countries, the states engage in battles for pieces of land. We have also noted that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has attracted some level of conflict because of its construction. Because of time, I will just go into the conclusion because I think we need to digest all this and begin to discuss them. I will provide a printout of these key issues that I'm presenting. In conclusion, therefore, IGAD countries can strengthen justice institutions aimed at protecting the rights of the least powerful in our country, in our society, in our habitat, and stop discrimination and marginalization, improve human rights, manage an equal distribution of public goods and services, denounce impunity, and constitute accountability mechanisms. It calls for a collective effort because achieving them represents profound challenges to humanity's shared aspirations, especially if we want to achieve the much desired sustainable development goal and a democratic and peaceful region. At the same time, the crisis that we have mentioned also represent a unique opportunity for us to achieving the transformative vision of 2030 agenda. The 2030 agenda, especially SDG 16, with its emphasis on the rule of law and access to justice, is central to the more peaceful, just, and inclusive economic and social recovery. We remain hopeful that IGAD member states will accelerate the pace of technological growth, improve human capital through education, support resilience strategy, strengthen the shared challenges posed by pandemics, COVID-19, Ebola, and other life-threatening diseases. We now face fundamental choices as individuals, societies, governments, regions, and collectively as one human family to define and build the kind of future we want. We can build our societies to define and build the kind of, we can build our societies to resist vulnerabilities to shocks and crises during war, climate-related risks, improve both criminal and restorative form of justice to settle land conflicts and dispute. We can have all our democratic values and principles. We must challenge and not obey discriminatory laws, policies, social norms, and stereotypes that hold our people back from realizing their full developmental potential. The land we have in the region is abundant, and it is ours. The resources we have underneath and above are ours. The onus is upon us to adjust, to develop it, to build more climate resilient developmental model, better agricultural model, improve our own land tenure systems, better and well-equipped our legal systems, adopt better technology, foster positive and innovative mindset, especially amongst our youth, and above all, reclaim our economic independence so that we can manage our resources by ourselves and for our better future. Enjoy your stay in Munyonyo, in Kampala. Thank you for so much. I thank you all, and God bless you abundantly for God and my country. I will leave these books here to be given to the Chief Justice Owindolo and also to the Vice President, Jessica. Thank you for seeing you here, Jessica. I saw you in Tana. I was in Tana last week on Sunday. Thank you again for your tireless effort. And then to the Minister of Lands. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to Dr. Okello. Your Excellency, it's my great pleasure now to call upon the Director, Agriculture and Environment from IGAD, Mr. Daher Elmi, to represent the Executive Secretary from IGAD. Give him a round of applause as he makes his way. My apology, it's Lucy Dax from IGAD who's going to do the speech. Thank you very much. Let's give her a big round of applause.
Thank you very much, my distinguished brother Mish. My name is Lucy. I'm the head of mission of IGAD to the Republic of Uganda, and therefore I will speak most humbly on behalf of the Executive Secretary of IGAD, His Excellency Dr. Workene Gebeyehu. I'm most honored and esteemed chief guest and host, my distinguished sister, Your Excellency Jessica Rose Alupo Epel, Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, the Honorable Chief Justices for the from the East African Community and IGAD member states, and I take great honor also to recognize their host here, our Chief Justice of the Republic of Uganda, His Lordship Owiny-Dollo, the Honorable Minister, Honorable Judith Nabakova, who's the Minister of Lands, who's seated with us. Excellency, I would also like to acknowledge Her Excellency, the Director General of IDLO, Ian Begel, the Honorable Ministers and Cabinet Secretaries of IGAD member states and the East African Community, Your Excellencies, the Ambassadors of the IGAD member states, the distinguished chairpersons, directors, and esteemed experts of all land concerned organizations, esteemed bilateral and multilateral development partners of IGAD, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of His Excellency, the Executive Secretary of IGAD, Dr. Workene, I would like to warmly welcome you to this high-level regional conference on land, climate change, and conflict in the East and the Horn of Africa. Excellency, Madam Vice President and distinguished delegates, I would also like to request for your kind understanding on the Executive Secretary's absence from this important occasion. On the request of the AU Chairperson, Dr. Workene is on an urgent mission on duty regarding an urgent peace and stability process in our region. And therefore, he requests that you allow him come on a working visit to Uganda at a later date. Your Excellency, he would also like to thank you very much, Madam Vice President, for all the support that the government of the Republic of Uganda has given to the IGAD Secretariat, its member states, and all the development partners towards the success of not just this event, but all events on peace, security, and regional integration. Down the ages, Your Excellency and distinguished delegates, there is a saying that a man is quicker to forget the death of his father than the loss of his land. Therefore, Excellency and distinguished delegates, the overall objective of this conference is to enable high-level policymakers to exchange country and cross-country policy experiences and lessons learned so that we can derive a regional agenda that will transform land conflicts and climate change conflicts into development, peace, and security in the East and the Horn of Africa. If you may recall, Excellency, Madam Vice President, ever since the formation of IGAD in 1986, and the Republic of Uganda is a founder member state, IGAD has faced the enormous task of resolving conflicts in the Horn of Africa. Land conflicts is just one of them. If you may recall, Madam Excellency, IGAD has been involved tirelessly. The Secretariat has worked with the heads of state and governments in peace and security processes. I can mention a few: the South Sudan peace process that led to the Comprehensive Peace Agreement of 2005 in Naivasha, and consequently led to the independence of South Sudan into the Republic of South Sudan. IGAD and the heads of state and government in the region have also been spearheading the revitalized peace agreement on the resolution of South Sudan civil conflict, the peace process in the Republic of Sudan, the peace process for the resolution of the conflict in Tigray region in Ethiopia, and IGAD cluster-based conflict resolution mechanisms that the IGAD experts spoke about just before I came here, and the daily conflict early warning and response mechanisms in the Horn and East Africa, which IGAD provides so that decision makers can actually intervene on these conflicts. In this conference, Your Excellency and distinguished experts, it's important to reflect on ways in which we can strengthen access to land justice, but more so through alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, and also strengthen conflict management mechanisms, including the integration of statutory and customary institutions of land. Your Excellency, I would like to mention and emphasize that with the current climate change crisis that has beset us in terms of weather extremities, there is a strong nexus between climate change and resource-based conflicts. The expert has elaborated, but just to mention, torrential rains continue to increase and overall flooding in all our region. IGAD region continues to be beset by drought and famine. Your Excellency, Madam Vice President, you have met the Executive Secretary of IGAD in different occasions and is always talking to you about the need to support member states against the current challenge of drought and famine. And this is indeed related to the subject matter of today of enhancing effective land governance for not just livelihoods for our region, but for peace, security, and stability of our region. Your Excellency, Madam Vice President and distinguished delegates, the IGAD Secretariat would like to thank you for giving us political support in this process. We would also like to express gratitude to the government of Sweden for technical and financial assistance, the IGAD partners who are present here, the International Development Law Organization, the International Land Coalition, and supporting pastoralism and agriculture in recurrent and protracted crises for the great teamwork that has seen to the success of this conference. We look forward to insightful conference deliberations and conclusions. The IGAD Secretariat also wishes you all a fruitful East Africa Justice Week. Excellency, Madam Vice President, and distinguished delegates, I thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause to Madame Lucy. Your Excellency, the next person I'm going to call to the podium has a very rich CV. She's worked as a special advisor to the United Nations for many years. She hails from many miles away from a country called New Zealand. and she's what you call a distinguished civil servant. She has over 4 decades of experience. She has worked on peace, security, development, human rights, management, gender, and organizational reform. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome the Director General of the International Development Law Organization, IDLO, Jan Beagle. Big round of applause.
Your Excellency, Madam Vice President, Honorable Chief Justices, Honorable Ministers, distinguished head of the mission of IGAD in Uganda, distinguished members of Parliament, senior government officials, diplomatic community, development partners, and all distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Your Excellency, firstly, I would like to extend my thanks to the government of the Republic of Uganda for hosting this high-level regional conference, for your presence here today, and for warmly welcoming us to your beautiful country. As Director General of the International Development Law Organization, the only global intergovernmental organization exclusively devoted to promoting the rule of law to advance peace and sustainable development, it is an honor to join delegates from so many countries at this historic event. And IDLO is pleased to co-organize this conference and the 2 judicial conferences taking place during this East Africa Justice Week. For many years, IDLO has been a proud partner of several countries in the East and Horn of Africa, supporting justice sector reforms in Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, South Sudan, and more recently, Rwanda, through our programming, research, and advocacy. I appreciate the strong collaboration we enjoy with governments, justice institutions, and civil society in the region. And I am proud of the results we have achieved together in promoting inclusive, people-centered approaches to the rule of law and access to justice. The theme of this conference, land conflict, peace and security, is at the core of the IGAD Agenda 2030, the Agenda 2063, and the Sustainable Development Goals. It also resonates with IDLO's goal of making justice systems more effective and responsive to people's needs, while ensuring that the rule of law drives peace and sustainable development. I would like to begin by focusing on the essential link between access to land, peace, and sustainable development. As we all know, and we have heard compellingly this morning, competition over land and natural resources is one of the major causes of political, economic, and social instability in the East and Horn of Africa, and indeed all over the world. Access to land directly affects the region's politics and demographics, heightens tensions between different ethnic and social groups, and exacerbates the impact of climate change and food insecurity. It is now well recognized that good governance and the rule of law can play a pivotal role in facilitating equitable access and management of land and natural resources. But as we are all aware, legislative and policy frameworks, important as they are only part of the story. Implementation is key. Inclusive land laws and policies, the improved ability of land dispute resolution actors, and the enhanced capacity of justice seekers to understand and protect their rights are all essential elements in preventing and mitigating land conflicts. They also contribute to building trust and strengthening the social contract. IDLO's work in the East and Horn of Africa and around the world is guided by our core values, especially putting people and their needs at the center of our efforts and ensuring that our program is nationally owned in the broadest possible sense. An important part of this work in the region focuses on promoting access to land justice for all, fostering the sustainable use of natural resources, and facilitating climate change resilience planning, with a special focus on women and girls and other vulnerable groups. Allow me to share a few examples of results achieved in partnership with you, our national partners. In Uganda, where 65% of the workforce is involved in the agricultural sector, and nearly 3/4 of all Ugandans are subsistence farmers, land rights for many rural communities are insecure and unclear, and vulnerable groups, including the poor, women, youth, and indigenous peoples, are the hardest hit. The interlinkage between land and power, as well as the use of land as proof of economic empowerment, adds another layer to the level of land insecurity. In this context, IDLO has been promoting accessible and speedy resolution of disputes, including land disputes, through alternative dispute resolution mechanisms grounded on mediation, as opposed to lengthy court processes. By combining this with legal aid for communities, IDLO has ensured access to essential justice and information services for over 16,000 vulnerable people. And of these, 4,200 were able to successfully conclude their disputes through mediation. The cases were concluded within 3 to 6 weeks of reporting, a significant milestone considering that a similar civil case takes at least 800 days through a regular court process. In Kenya, over the past 2 years, the impact of climate change has increased with droughts and floods recorded across the country. The arid and semi-arid counties have been the most adversely affected. COVID-19 compounded these natural disasters with severe impact on the national economy, which is highly dependent on agriculture, forestry, fishery, and tourism. In line with a growing focus on climate change adaptation, Kenya, with the support of IDLO and other development partners, has developed a comprehensive domestic framework to comply with its climate commitments. This includes the Climate Change Framework Policy, the National Climate Change Action Plan, the National Adaptation Plan, the Climate Change Act, and the National Drought Management Authority Act. At this critical juncture, mainstreaming climate strategies into wider sustainable development plans and/or sectoral policies can help to maximize coordination and minimize trade-offs between climate and development goals. To achieve this objective, IDLO is currently supporting local governments in Kenya to conduct legal audits and develop context-specific climate change policies and action plans, which detail their adaptation as well as developmental strategies. In Somalia, we are helping to address land scarcity, which often leads to competition between pastoralists and agricultural communities belonging to different clans. Livestock rearing in Somalia, a significant segment of the agricultural sector, is anchored to a pastoral system that relies on safe and secure access to existing natural resources. IDLO takes a flexible approach when promoting access to justice, including for land-related disputes. The Alternative Dispute Resolution Centers, established by the Somali Ministry of Justice, with the technical support of IDLO, function as customary and informal justice service integration hubs. They provide free dispute resolution services while referring more complex or criminal cases to formal courts. And as the ADR centers have gained expertise in resolving community disputes, they have become a reliable dispute resolution system for land-related conflicts. IDLO's recent assessment of the ADR centers indicates that to date, these dispute resolution mechanisms have solved more than 5,000 disputes, 23% of which related to land and immovable property. IDLO is also piloting an innovative approach in Somalia, which uses environmental information to forecast and plan the provision of justice services. The ADR centers receive climate and security forecasts from the National Environmental Research and National Disaster Preparedness Authority, setting out potential hotspots of insecurity caused by climatic conditions and migration. This allows the ADR centers to plan their work seasonally and direct the location of mobile ADR centers that will serve the targeted pastoralist communities. As we have already heard this morning, any discussion about land will be incomplete without discussing the rights of women. This is an issue very close to my heart and central to IGAD's mandate. Across the East and Horn of Africa region, gender inequality remains a key challenge. Recent data from the Economic Commission for Africa on the progress in the implementation of the SDGs in Africa shows that most countries are not on track to meet the targets set for SDG 5. This does not mean that progress has not been made. Over the last 10 years, several countries in the East and Horn of Africa have developed legislative, administrative, and institutional reforms aimed at advancing gender equality in land governance. However, despite encouraging results, such as the recognition of customary land rights for women in Uganda and legal protection of individual use and occupancy rights for women in Ethiopia, there is still a remarkable gender gap when it comes to the implementation of land governance interventions. These shortfalls are primarily due to a lack of institutional capacity, both financial and technical, discriminatory laws and practices, underrepresentation of women in decision-making platforms, and frankly, to limited political will to prioritize women's land rights. And against this background, it is crucial to remember that proper and equitable management of land and natural resources is one of the driving forces of gender equality. Women with secured land rights are in a better position to guarantee sustainable livelihoods for themselves and their families. Unfortunately, while almost 80% of the wealth in the East and Horn of Africa is generated through land, less than 10% is currently owned by women. For IDLO, assuring access to land and land security represents a priority for the region's sustainable economic development, as well as a fundamental milestone for improving agricultural production, advancing gender equality, and reducing food insecurity. IDLO adopts a gender-sensitive approach to securing women's land rights, promoting the active participation of women in land law drafting processes in both Kenya and Uganda, and fostering their involvement, both as justice seekers and providers, in land dispute resolution mechanisms in Uganda, Kenya, and Somalia. Women must be recognized as key agents of change. Realizing gender equality and empowering women and girls and young people will make a crucial contribution not only to SDG 5, but across the 2030 agenda. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, I would like to conclude on a note of partnership. The ambitious results outlined in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the IGAD Agenda, Agenda 2063, and all national and subnational development plans can only be achieved with the shared expertise, experiences, and solidarity that we bring together. I look forward to capitalizing on this high-level regional conference to strengthen our partnerships, learn from each other, collectively identify priority areas, and jointly define concrete solutions to reduce conflict, secure land rights, and promote an integrated regional approach to this complex issue. Together, we can transform the deliberations of this conference into concrete action that changes the lives of people on the ground. IDLO is proud to partner with all of you in this important effort. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause, the Director General of IDO, Jan Beagle. It's now my great pleasure to call upon the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Lands to come and welcome the Honorable Minister, who will then proceed to invite two other key speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dorcas Okalany.
Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, Chief Justices from IGAD member states and East Africa, Honorable Ministers present from IGAD and East Africa member states, Ministers of State, judges from courts of judicature, members of Parliament, representatives of development partners, government officials, academia, civil society representatives, members of the press, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I believe it is good morning. I take this opportunity to welcome you to this very important high-level conference, which we expect to share cross-country policy experiences and lessons learned with a view of establishing regional agenda with policy priorities that comprehensively respond to land conflicts in the IGAD region. The purpose of this conference is to enable high-level policymakers to exchange country and cross-country policy experiences and lessons learned with a view of establishing a regional agenda and national policy priorities that comprehensively respond to land conflicts. Land is a factor of production, and therefore any challenges and conflicts affecting it, it also affects the development of our countries negatively in the form of political exclusion, social discrimination, environmental degradation, and economic marginalization. Relatedly, the current urbanization and land use practices in the region are indicative of a process that needs considerable attention in terms of proper land use planning for wealth creation as a basis of achieving industrialization and the development of the services sector. In the IGAD region, the labor force in agriculture sector constitutes over 70% of the population. The industrial sector is still low and constitutes below 10% of the population, while services sector constitutes an estimated 20% of the population. When compared with other regional blocks like the United States of America, it has less than 1% of the labor force in the agricultural sector, 22.9% in the industrial sector, and 76.4% in the services sector. Our land policy interventions should emulate those regional blocks which moved from agrarian to industrial societies so that we can optimally utilize our land, while at the same time we protect the ecological systems from destruction and degradation in order to curtail primitive land use practice like land fragmentation in favor of land consolidation. We therefore need to share and exchange views on the prevalent causes and impacts and ways of addressing land conflict in the IGAD region, and raise awareness of the importance of SDGs #1 on poverty, ensuring that citizens acquire proper land and property ownership and use their land optimally. SDG 5 on gender equality and ownership, which seeks to ensure women and marginalized groups own land for them to produce surpluses for food security and sell. SDG 11 hints on the need for more sustainable urban cities and communities, including addressing slum dwellers' needs. SDG 16 promotes peace, justice, and strong institutions in the land sector for efficient and effective land administration services. This is what will transform the IGAD region into a prosperous region in a peaceful manner, in the respect of environmental protection, food security, minimal transboundary conflicts for socio-economic development of the region and Africa at large. There is a specific need to resolve issues regarding unlawful evictions, which adversely affect majority of our most vulnerable categories of indigenous communities in the IGAD region, because most of them lack legal documentation. For instance, Uganda has recently issued legal documentation in form of certificate of customary ownership to the Pokot, Pian, Tepeth indigenous communities in Uganda as a means of safeguarding their land rights against competing rights from unscrupulous mining companies and individuals. It is therefore important for all countries in the IGAD region to have a vibrant land market, which calls for the need to have cheap, secure, and effective systems for recording and protecting and transferring land under all tenure systems. The outcome of this meeting will provide the basis for establishment of an IGAD agenda on addressing land-based resource conflicts and issue concrete recommendations for the review of land-related policies and action plans for to better integrate land conflict management. It shall also serve as a platform for rebuilding Pan-African network at all levels on mitigating land-related conflicts for peace and tranquility and sustainable development. Uganda looks forward to the outcome of this high-level meeting, and in conclusion, I wish you fruitful deliberations, and I thank you all. I say all this for God and my country. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Excuse me, Honorable Permanent Secretary, I think it would be only correct if you invited the Minister.
Thank you very much. I take this opportunity to invite the Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development of Uganda, Madam Judith Nabakoba, to address the conference. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, Major Retired Jessica Rose Alupo Epel, my Lord, the Chief Justices from IGAD member states and ESC, Honorable Ministers present from IGAD and ESC member states, Ministers of State present, judges from courts of judicature, members of parliament, representatives of development partners, IGAD country director, IDLO director general, government officials, academia, civil society representatives, members of the press, distinguished participants, good afternoon to you all. I take this opportunity to welcome Madam Vice President to this regional high-level conference on land and conflict. And I want to thank you for taking off your time, despite your busy schedule, to be part of this occasion. Before you, Your Excellence, are country delegations from IGAD region member states, whom I'll introduce. And I would request that once I read your country, please stand up for recognition. We have delegates from Djibouti. Could you please stand up? Welcome. We have Eritrea. Then we have delegates from Ethiopia. Welcome. We have delegates from Kenya. Welcome. Somalia. South Sudan. Sudan. And finally, Uganda. In addition, may I also introduce IGAD Secretariat and IDLO, whom together with my ministry, we are responsible for planning and implementing activities geared towards holding this conference. IGAD and IDLO, could you please stand up for recognition? Welcome. Madam Vice President, this conference on land and conflict is jointly organized by IGAD, the International Developmental Organization, and Government of Uganda. There are also other associated events to this land conference which are underway. They include the annual convening of the African Women Judges and the annual East African Judges Symposium. All these have come together to discuss matters of land and conflict management in the EAC and IGAD region. Your Excellency, Madam Vice President, the three meetings shall each adopt a declaration that will provide a basis for the establishment of the IGAD agenda on addressing land-based resource conflicts and issue concrete recommendations for the review of national land policies and action plans to better integrate conflict management on land matters. In view of these circumstances, Your Excellency, our recommended policy actions should be able to guide and support IGAD countries' development agenda. This is because Uganda and other sub-Saharan countries have market-driven economies. It is now important for land policy interventions to guide the entire stakeholders on ensuring that there is certainty of land ownership, which will enable citizens to correctly, openly identify and recognize landowners and any other land user rights that exist on land at any one time. This in turn should lead to greater social cohesion in the region. Your Excellency, greater land security should in turn lead to greater productivity and investment on the land. There is need to reduce on the land disputes and conflicts which give rise to expensive litigation. Yet some categories of society, especially the poor and the vulnerable categories, may not have the money to afford the litigation process. And in most cases, they end up losing their rights on land. Your Excellency, this meeting, therefore, will discuss a number of options, and we expect that the ministers for land in the IGAD region are expected to approve an IGAD regional agenda on land conflicts, peace and security, sustainable development, gender equality, and climate change for endorsement by the presidents of the IGAD member states. Your Excellency, this high-level policy forum will seek to address issues of access to justice and responsible land governance. This is due to the fact that there may be need for identifying any new emerging best practices in the managing of land conflicts through legislative and policy reforms, and based on the need to formalize land rights in areas affected by these land conflicts. 2, the issue of peace and security, especially regarding addressing transboundary and cross-border conflicts in the region. It also includes seeking solutions to resolve inter-community land conflicts and protecting communities and vulnerable populations from forced evictions. 3, the issue of how land rights, climate change, and food systems can be managed to avoid the impact of climate change on conflict, while at the same time improve the land governance for food system transformation and environmental protection for sustainable development. 4 is the issue of realizing the rights to land of women and girls as part of strengthening access to justice, to realize women's rights to land and secure land rights of the marginalized in the aftermath of conflict. This meeting, Your Excellency, therefore, consider about 7 critical land-related issues, which include guaranteeing food security, reducing extreme poverty and hunger, managing regional and global climate change, conserving and protecting biodiversity and environment from human erratic behavior that destroy critical ecological systems, i.e. wetlands and forest reserves, resolving resource conflicts arising from transboundary movements of indigenous people and wildlife, ensuring gender equality and equity, and preventing forced evictions through guaranteeing land security of tenure, respect international boundaries in order to avert future disagreements on real positions of national borders as a basis for harmonious regional migration process. Your Excellency, I want to take this opportunity once again to thank IGAD country delegations for prioritizing this high-level meeting. And I want also to thank IGAD, IDLO, the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development for their tireless effort to organize this very important conference. The preparations have been on since July this year. Your Excellency, as I end, allow me to thank all the distinguished participants for having allowed to be part of this meeting. We hope that we shall come up with concrete recommendations, practical solutions that will help us tackle the land question in our country or in our region. I once again, Madam, thank you very much for coming, and allow me invite Your Lordship, the Chief Justice, to come give his remarks and thereafter invite you to address the meeting. Thank you once again. For God and my country, merci beaucoup, most welcome, asante sana, mwebale munonga, mwebale kuja, feel at home. God bless you.
Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, my lords, the Chief Justices of the IGAD member states, the Honorable Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, Honorable Ministers present, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this conference on resolving land-based conflicts on our continent. I would like also to congratulate each one of you for surviving the COVID-19 pandemic, which is the reason we are here together today. I am glad that this high-level meeting will tackle one of the most volatile areas in our justice system. Land justice throughout most of the African jurisdictions has suffered a number of setbacks. Historically, land was communally owned in most regions. But with the invasion of colonialists, land was parceled out and apportioned to various holders. Let me explain this. In many countries of Africa, there were settler communities from the colonial masters, and almost invariably in each of these countries, independence was won through the barrel of the gun. Algeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Angola, and so on and so forth. That points to the importance of land in the life of humans. In Uganda, the British colonial masters introduced new land tenures that was foreign, new forms of land alienation, where huge parcels of land were given to collaborators, those who helped the British to colonize various parts of Uganda, creating the country we now call Uganda. By the stroke of the colonial pen, hitherto landowners became something inferior to even squatters. They were worse off than squatters. They became statutory licensees of the beneficiaries of land given to them, their own land given to collaborators. The rest of the land that was not given out to persons for which titles were issued, and the vernacular name for this land in Uganda was Milo, because they were parceled in miles. The measurement was in miles. The rest of the land was declared crown land. The Queen automatically became the owner of the rest of the lands that was not given out to individuals or institutions as freeholds. When we gained independence, our people had new masters. The state then owned the land that used to belong to the Queen or to the King. What was crown land now became public land. And our people continued to be statutory licensees, meaning you could be literally evicted from your land, which you considered your ancestral inheritance, and given to someone else who claimed to have the capacity to develop that land better than you. And you'd be paid some token and given 6 months within which to leave the land. All this was legislated, was in the Constitution, it was in the Public Lands Act of 1969, and the rules made thereafter. However, in 1995, we made our most recent, the one which is in force now, the Constitution of 1995, which liberated customary land which was privately owned, from the colonial bondage that was perpetuated by independence governments, and raised Article 237, as a matter of fact, raised customary land to the status of freehold land, notwithstanding that the bulk of that land is not registered, but still it stands at par with freehold or milo land. The only difference is that the bulk of it is not registered. That was a milestone which was achieved in this country. There's a lot that can be said about it, but that's not the purpose of my address now. The land that was taken away during colonialism and perpetuated were for plantation, sugarcane, tea, and so on and so forth, for mines. And as I said, in many countries, land was alienated for settler communities, and they would not give the land back easily. People had to pick up arms to get their land back. When challenges of urbanization and monetization of our economy set in, land conflicts escalated, especially in densely populated places and urban centers. In Uganda, Kigezi, Bugisu, and Kampala were highly populated and experienced these conflicts more intensely than elsewhere. In addition, the ever-emerging conflict across the region and the continent regarding scarce resources, the coexistence of registered interests along with an unregistered interest such as customary rights over the same or adjacent land would escalate the problem. And for the IGAD area, I grew up before the small arms destroyed our communities. I grew up in an area where the Turkana of Karamoja, of Kenya, could, during the worst form of dry period, bring their cattle very, very much near our place and graze peacefully and then go back to Kenya during the rains. And I believe this story was replicated everywhere in the IGAD area. I believe it was replicated in the Sudan, where herders from Darfur would come south and go back. So this was the story of Africa. This was before the small arms brought in new complications. There was always the sharing of resources. It went from time immemorial, and the communities had their own ways of settling disputes if there were any, because there was equality of arms between communities. Again, this is an area I cannot go deep into because it requires a full paper to present on. Now, the growth of population is another problem that affects struggle for land. Land conflict inspired criminal offenses, including murders, have overwhelmed the courts. The 25%, which was reported here as being land disputes, with regard to fighting over ownership of land. Over 50%, if you take northern Uganda, over 50% of criminal offenses are related to land or arise from land disputes. So the 25% is the formal land dispute, who owns what. But then there is the negative multiplier effect of these land disputes spilling over into very serious criminal offenses. And the failure to register land due to poverty, ignorance, and other factors has left it easy to fraudulently remove and or extend boundary marks, including alienating the whole land in some cases. Civil wars that displace people in some places of Uganda is another source of tears. When the displaced persons returned to their former homes or villages, it was difficult to identify their lands. In some places, boundaries had been intentionally removed, while in other places the landmarks had been swept away by other circumstances. I think Dr. Ngoma speaks about this in his book, which I'm grateful to be given one. I will. Dr. Ngoma, I'll read your book religiously from cover to cover. I was perusing through and I found it an interesting collection of useful material. Now, with the growth in population to about 43 million people in Uganda, with a population density of 229 persons per square kilometer of land, an urban population of 11.4 million people, it goes without saying that the land question must be addressed with utmost urgency. Equally, in many countries in the region and in Africa, the land disputes among neighbors, and especially on common resource sharing, have become very common and therefore demand of us more and more attention. Because of our common history and shared values and challenges, I'm very optimistic that finding a solution together is the way to go. Listening to each other's experiences and various ideas that are going to be shared during this meeting will give us a variety of options to harness. Whereas we come from diverse settings, the challenges of an African country remain largely the same. Being well aware that the land resource is inelastic, it is incumbent upon us to devise means of sustainability using this resource and to help litigants appreciate this reality. It is also our duty as the judiciary to guide our government's interventions on the best remedial measures to adopt sustainable development for individuals and communities within our African nations. I believe we have a duty to continue to protect all interests in land, whether registered or non-registered, in accordance with existing laws. There is an African saying I find quite interesting, because we are used to always saying land is our ancestral inheritance. This is land our ancestors owned and handed over to us. We got it from our ancestors or from our parents. The African saying is land is actually not our ancestral inheritance. Instead, land is what we have borrowed from future generations. The owners of the land we till today, the land we occupy until today, were not our ancestors. They had borrowed this land from us. They handed back the land to us as the true owners. Now we owe it to future generations to whom we must hand over, meaning we have no right to destroy this land. We have no right to in any way waste this land. We have to keep it for the true owners and hand over the land to them. I find this really instructive. I find this really meaningful in the quest to handle the laws pertaining to land ownership. The courts have the power to make land more productive by protecting investments, land rights of women and widows, and timely resolution of family succession disputes and conflicts emanating from government projects, such as road construction and mining rights. promoting alternative dispute resolution in land disputes, and establishing and empowering specialized courts and tribunals might offer cheaper and quicker justice than relying solely on the formal court setup. I am therefore pleased to welcome you all to this high-level session on resolution of land-based conflicts and to wish all of us successful deliberations. Thank you for listening to me. Your Excellency, permit me to now invite you to address this congregation here assembled and do the needful in opening the conference. Excellency.
The Chief Justice of the Republic of Uganda, Alphonse Owiny-Dollo, and the Chief Justices from the region present in this meeting, all the judges and justices of the respected courts which have been named by the MC who are here, the Honorable Minister of Lands, Judith Nabakova, and other ministers here present from the region, and ministers of state, members of parliament present, the permanent secretary, Ministry of Lands, and all other permanent secretaries who are present, and other very senior government officials, the executive secretary of IGAD, represented here by Ms. Lucy Atekit, the executive secretary, ILO, all invited distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you warm greetings from His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda, who was supposed to have been here physically to address you, but because of other equally demanding state duties, has requested that you accept him to participate in this meeting by representation. And he sent me to represent him in this conference. And that's therefore I'm going to read his message, which he sent me to deliver to you. But before I read this message, let me also join the Minister of Lands to welcome all of you to Uganda and wish you a very successful conference whose themes, as they were read there, are very timely in resolving so many 21st century challenges which affect the people of Africa, but most importantly, the IGAD member states and the East African states. The Minister of Lands in Uganda here is a very active participant in terms of ensuring that the land rights are adhered to, but also the common man, the common people have clear guidelines on how to manage their land. I want to thank you, Minister, before I read the President's speech, because I might not find time to thank you again. We appreciate what you do whenever you go to the countryside to talk to the people about how to use the land, but most importantly, how to secure their land from the land grabbers. But also you have, on behalf of government, liberated many grassroots people by facilitating the acquisition of land titles for their land. So I wanted to give a kind remark for you as you continue with the meeting, as I heard that those are some of the feedbacks you will be sharing, so that the other countries who may not have that can also borrow a leaf and help the grassroots people to use their land productively. Someone said that I was in Tana last week. That is very true. In a certain place called Abir Hada in Ethiopia there. Forgotten the name of the city. The name is a sentence. And when we were there, we deliberated almost on similar issues which have been named, which you have been deliberating from yesterday and you are going to deliberate on. But one of the issues that came out clearly is that if we want to move faster, if we want to move together, if we want to avoid external interruption to our development programs or our development agenda as Africa, we should learn to share those resources that cut across countries or states, including lakes, rivers, game parks, name them, in a manner that we recognize them as a source of peace and unity rather than a source of conflict. I heard someone counting sources of conflict between states, but referring to shared resources. So personally, I would be looking forward to an outcome after a well thought out discussion, which points out to some of those natural resources to become sources of unity and peace, because they can be shared without cheating anyone. I remember I gave an example of the River Nile, which flows from Uganda up to the Mediterranean Sea, and the waters are shared by all the member states or countries where the River Nile passes. So I'd like you to look into that direction, Lord Chief Justice, and many other very important and brilliant ideas that I am sure you will come up with. Personally, I know that the minerals are in the land, the forests are in the land, and we know the value of forests. The lakes and the rivers are also in the land, and you know the value of lakes and rivers in production. So to say that land management and conflict is a very important topic, because more often than not, it is actually those resources hidden in the land that cause conflict. But I am glad that you have identified land, because that will enable you to discuss all hidden resources which are in the land, which are a cause of conflict. Let me now address you directly with the message of His Excellency the President. I wish to welcome you all to this high-level regional conference on land and conflict for the IGAD member states. Uganda is proud to host this important meeting in the capital city, Kampala. I wish to commend the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and the International Development Law Organization for organizing this conference to discuss interventions on effective land management, climate change, and other land-related issues affecting the region. Uganda is one of the IGAD member states. Other states include Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. IGAD was established to promote joint development strategies on microeconomic policies and programs to harmonize policies on trade, customs, transport, communication, agriculture, natural resources, and environment, as well as promotion of free movement of goods and services amongst member states. IGAD also promotes programs aimed at achieving regional food security and sustainable development of natural resources and environmental protection, and encouraging member states to collectively combat drought and other natural disasters and their consequences. IGAD member states and East African region generally has enjoyed cordial relations over the years. Land in Uganda is acquired and managed under the 4 land tenure systems. These are freehold, leasehold, mailo, and customary. To date, the customary land tenure system remains a predominant land tenure system where land is managed based on customs, values, and norms of the society. Land is a crucial factor of production with inelastic supply despite its increasing demand. With the rise in the population and the need for land for investment, there is need for proper planning across the region to manage this essential resource effectively. It remains crucial to us in the region to devise measures towards reducing land conflict and improve on securing land rights so as to spur sustainable development. Tenure security supports sustainable economic development by allowing for productive land investments. It is an enabling factor for improved agricultural production and increasing food security. In the recent time, we have experienced adverse effects of climate change in Africa and across the globe. It is important that we put in place measures to ensure sustainable land use to prevent encroachment on protected areas like wetlands, forest reserves, etc. This requires adequate and inclusive land laws and policy frameworks, capable and legitimate institutions for allocating land and resolving disputes, access to justice for those seeking to protect their land rights, empowered communities and spaces for dialogue to allow civil society and other stakeholders to voice their views and concerns. Uganda has made progress in documenting tenure rights through massive land titling initiatives under the Milo, customary, and freehold tenure. The land information system has been a basis for propelling efficiency and curbing of fragmentation, which is a big problem in Uganda. Additionally, Government has instituted strategies geared towards increasing public awareness and vigilance of the legal provisions of the land laws. These laws are meant for the good of all the citizens of Uganda and should be used to protect them. I would like to commend our neighboring countries for maintaining a cordial relationship with Uganda, which has aided harmony and limited transboundary and cross-border conflicts in IGAD and ESC member states. I urge you all to commit to promoting security of tenure for all citizens, regardless of their status, religion, or ethnicity, so that they feel safe to invest in their countries. Finally, I wish you a fruitful and productive deliberation. I trust that the resolutions from this conference will aid in the formulation of policies, laws, regulations, and interventions which promote the socio-economic transformation of our countries. I thank you. That is a message which His Excellency the President sent me to present to you. And I say this for God and my country.
Your Excellency, before you sit down, Your Excellency, I would like to request that you stay standing because we have something special that the organizing committee would like to hand over to you. I'd like to call Esther Obaikol from IGAD. I'd like to call Barbara Kilei from IDLO. I'd like to call Odess Kubwimana from ILC. I'd like to call Fiona Flinton from Spark to make their way to the front. Your Excellency, this is a land conference, and the team decided what better way to celebrate the land but to show you what beauty that Uganda has. That is Lion's Rock from Kidepo Valley National Park in northern Uganda, one of the most beautiful, untouched wildernesses that we have. We'd like to hand this over to you as a symbol of our appreciation for taking time out and also to thank His Excellency for supporting us. So let's give them a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, we'd like to now kindly ask you to take a nice walk to the flags. We'd like to take a couple of official photos. We'd like to start with His Lordship, the Chief Justice, with the Director General of IDLO, and together with the Honorable Minister. If the protocol team, and Madame Lucy, if you could kindly guide Her Excellency. I have been advised from a protocol standpoint that let us kindly do the anthems first, and then we'll do the pictures, I think, which makes sense. Can we kindly have one stanza of the East African anthem and one stanza of the national anthem? Can we all kindly be upstanding, ladies and gentlemen? East African anthem, please. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you may take your seats. Let's give a huge round of applause to our guest of honor, Her Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda. Your Excellency, before you depart, we'd like to kindly ask that you do us the honors of taking some pictures with our guests. I'd like to ask our guests, the Chief Justices, to kindly make their way to the flag post. I'd like to also ask our partners from SPARC, from IDLO, from IGAD, from ILI also to make their ways to the flag post. Thank you very much. Could we have the Chief Justices, please? If we could kindly remove your masks, the picture will look a little bit better. Just kindly remove your masks. Okay, thank you. Can we have our partners? Our partners from IGAD, IDLO, ILC, and from SPARC. We'd like to thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your time. I'd like you to send our kindest regards to His Excellency. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring to everybody's attention the program for this afternoon. We will have 4 breakout sessions. There will be no plenary in the afternoon. Tomorrow morning, we'll reconvene at 9 o'clock. But this afternoon, right now, it is 1:15, so we'll have